Hear ye, the District Court of Commonwealth of Virginia is now in session. Judge Richard Park was presiding. All rise.
All rise.
All rise.
The trial of the Commonwealth of Virginia versus John Brown is now in session. Bailiff, will you please read the charge against the defendant?
The jurors of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Jefferson County, duly impaneled upon their oaths, do present that John Brown, Aaron Stevens, and Edwin Kopeth, white men, and Shields Green, and John Copeland, free Negroes, together with other evil-minded and traitorous persons, did feloniously and traitorously make rebellion and levy war against the said Commonwealth of Virginia.
You may now sit. John Brown, rising from the bench. Bailiff. How do you plead to these charges against you?
Not guilty. I am not guilty of rebellion against Virginia. I am only of rebellion against evil slavery. I am not guilty.
Bailiff, will you please sit Mr. Brown down? Now, bailiff, please swear in the jury.
Would the jury please stand and raise your right hands? Will you as a juror in this case carefully carry out your duties as an open-minded judge of the testimony and evidence presented for and against the defendant and swear to fairly judge him on the basis of the charge brought against him? Be seated.
Gentlemen of the jury, the defendant to be given a fair trial, I am bound to execute our laws faithfully, that I must hold anyone accused of a crime as innocent until proven guilty by an honest and independent and impartial jury of his countrymen. If guilty, he will pay the extreme penalty for his guilt. Be fair and judge him on the evidence. If the prosecution is ready, they may now make their opening remarks.
Okay.
Shoot.
Your Honor,
Come to the front.
Yep, come on the front.
Your Honor, members of the jury, my name is Julianne Will, and I am representing the plaintiff in this case. I intend to prove John Brown guilty of the 3 charges listed in the indictment. My attorneys will talk about what Mr. Brown was doing at Harper's Ferry Armory October 16, 1859. They will tell you how it felt to be held hostage. They will tell you how they were held at gunpoint. Anyways, I think my team will have no trouble finding a way to prove that there is no insurrection, which is my next topic. In Mr. Phelps' account, there was an uprising against the government. Now to introduce my team's witnesses. One of the witnesses is Armistead Ball. His perspective is held from a hostage's perspective, which is also the account in which Lewis Washington's perspective is viewed, and if you think about it, is legal. The final plaintiff witness is George Phelps, and his perspective is from a conductor who drove Mr. Brown across a bridge. They reported him as looking suspicious. As a member of this case, with their perspectives already put down, do you not think Mr. John Brown is guilty? I would say the speech alone, there is enough evidence to prove Mr. Brown guilty.
Bailiff, check on John Brown. If the defense is ready, they may now make their opening statements to this court.
No, not yet. You're the defense opening close statement, yep.
Your Honors, member of the jury, my name is Kyle Haas, and I'm representing John Brown in this case. I intend to prove that John Brown is innocent of the 3 charges listed in the indictment. The prosecution will try to prove that John Brown is guilty of the charges that are simply not possible. For example, committing treason for a state that he doesn't reside. Remember that the burden of proof is on the prosecution will prove without a reasonable doubt that he is guilty. This is simply not possible. Mr. Brown is an empathetic man who treated his men with respect. The defense will call 3 witnesses that will share their constant testimonies that declare John Brown is a respectable man. Mr. Joseph Brewer, one of Brown's captives, will share his experience with the jury and clearly state that he was treated with respect. Another witness, Harry Hunter, will explain his point of view, again declaring Mr. Brown's humane treatment of his men. Mr. A.M. Kitzmiller said that Mr. Brown encouraged all hostages to influence without violence. Again, Mr. Kitzmiller will share that he was treated with this respect. The prosecution will state that Mr. Brown is guilty of treason. Treason is a crime against the state committed by the resident of the state. Mr. Brown is not a resident of the Commonwealth of Virginia, therefore he cannot be convicted of treason. The prosecution will also try to prove Mr. Brown is guilty of stirring up a revolt. This was never his intent, however, he and all his men became victims themselves. An example of this is when Mr. Brown tried to surrender with the white flag but was shot down and killed. The third accusation is murder. The defense will show again that Mr. Brown was simply trying to defend himself and the beliefs about slavery. So in all charges, Mr. Brown should be declared innocent. Imagine yourself in Mr. Brown's shoes. He is a man who has lost everything. He has lost his wife and 2 sons in recent events and is desperately passionate about the concept of slavery. His actions were intended to deliver a positive result, however, they came across as negative. For a man who is willing to dedicate his life to his cause, we must declare him guilty of all charges.
Judges?
Your Honor, I look upon the fear of insanity as a miserable artifice and pretext. I am perfectly unconscious of insanity, and I regret, as far as I am capable, any attempt to interfere with what I have on that sort.
Very well, Mr. Brown. Will the prosecution call its first witness?
Ready for the prosecution, who's calling their first witness?
Oh, Phillips says Sam.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God?
I do. So help me God.
George Phelps, what's your name and occupation?
I'm George Phelps. I'm a train conductor.
How did you know to stop the train?
A wounded patrolman on a bridge told me that some riflemen had seized the arsenal. So my reaction was to stop the train.
Did anyone end up being hurt?
Well, Shepard Hayward, a 3 black baggage master, tried to figure out why the train had stopped, and he got off, and I heard a gunshot, and he stumbled back in and yelled, "I was shot." And yeah, that's it.
Well, did John Brown board the train?
He did. I didn't realize at the time that it was John Brown. He got on the train and, yeah.
So, was John Brown in the area that Hayward was shot?
Yes.
Well, what did you do when you reached Monocacy?
I telegraphed the first alarm of the arsenal seizure.
Do you believe John Brown plotted a conspiracy to make an insurrection?
I believe he did. After after hearing his admissions to the court.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Defense now calls
Stay there, witness.
cross-examiner.
To be crossed.
Do you remember when your train arrived at Hartford's Ferry?
Shortly after midnight on Sunday.
Why did Brown come onto the train?
To ensure the safety of the passengers and the train as it was passing through.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Prosecution can now call its next witness.
The prosecution calls its second witness, Louis Washington.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do. So help me God.
Louis, what happened on the night of Ferry's raid?
On the night of the ferry's raid, I was woken up at about 1 a.m. in the morning to see 4 guns pointed at my head, and they were all loaded and ready to shoot at me.
Who all was there at that night?
Well, there were 6 people sitting in my hallway, and with them, there were 4 armed men and multiple hostages were there.
What did you do once you woke up? And what did the ones around you do?
They told me that I was imprisoned with them. I was allowed to put my clothes on and came out of my room to see all the weapons in my closet had been stolen from me.
What kind of weapons were stolen?
There was a closet full of guns and a sword my great-great-uncle George Washington received as a gift from Frederick the Great.
After your supply of weapons were taken, what did the men do to you?
I was put on horseback and was taken to Harper's Ferry.
Were you given any necessities there?
We were given nothing except for some food that we believed that was to be poisoned before served to us.
What events went on in the engine house?
I saw that Brown was very firm before the 100 so Marines attacked the engine house, and he took position near the far wall of the house.
What did John Brown do when the Marines stormed in?
He fired 2 shots before he was overwhelmed by the Marines and surrendered.
Did John Brown use you at all?
No, he told me to stay safe, and he told me not to fire at any men who were not armed.
What happened before the Marines stormed the engine house?
John Brown used several hostages to get the townspeople on good terms.
How did you feel during your time captured?
The whole time being with the men, I was chilled to my bones for my life and the others around. After being angered about my precious items being stolen, I felt pity about this lost cause.
What was it like when the Marines stormed in?
When the Marines stormed in, I felt unsure about whether I was going to be killed by the Marines, as I was in the same room as Brown was.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
How many men were taken hostage before you?
There were a lot of men. I did not count them all. There were about 16 to 20 people in the engine house with me.
No, before you were taken.
Before I was taken
Yeah.
in my house.
Yeah.
In my house, there was about the same amount of people. A couple died along the way, but there were about the same, about 20 or 25 at the time.
What did you say to Aaron Stevens when he asked you if you had a watch?
He asked me if I had a watch, but I refused to give it up since it was my most valued possession of mine.
Did Brown take care of the old artifact that he had taken?
Yes, he took care of it. He used it when the Marines stormed the engine house, but it was eventually when he got attacked, it was dropped, and then that's when I took it back. But yes, he did take good care of it.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Prosecution may now call the last witness.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, so help me God.
What is your name and occupation?
I'm Armstead Ball, and I'm a machinist for armor.
How are you involved with John Brown's plans?
I was used as a hostage to make sure that everything went along without any interruptions.
How did you become a hostage?
I was awakened by a sound around 1 in the morning, and as I went to investigate, I was taken prisoner by a couple of armed men.
How did you feel about this whole experience?
I was extremely frightened and was scared for my life.
Was anyone threatened by John Brown?
Yes, he pointed a gun at Lieutenant Stewart's head while he was under a flag of truce.
Did Brown tell you any of his plans?
Yes, I overheard about the plans to seize the weapons and use them to arm slaves.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Slavery is inhumane and needs to be stopped. Please check on John Brown.
How many hostages were in the engine house? I did not. What did John Brown tell you right before the fighting began? Not remember. Do you feel like Brown took good care of the hostages? Yes. No further questions, Your Honor.
Does the prosecution have any more witnesses to call?
No, Your Honor.
Will the defense please call its first witness?
The defense calls witness Joseph Brewer to the stand.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, so help me God.
Okay. When John Brown sent Aaron Stevens and one hostage out under a truce flag, was it apparent or obvious that they would be harmed?
No, it was not obvious at all.
When you were held hostage, were you harmed or threatened in any way?
No, I was not harmed at all, which is extraordinary.
What was your life like prior to capture?
I was a citizen of Harper's Ferry.
When Stevens approached the townspeople, was he expecting to be met with gunfire?
No, he was under a truce flag.
Did you voluntarily return to the engine house after rescuing Stevens from gunfire?
I returned after I got Stephen's body.
Did you ever try to escape captivity or harm any of Brown's men?
No, nobody tried to escape.
Further questions?
Prosecution may now cross-examine.
Okay. Mr. Joseph Brewer, how was your life before Mr. Brown held you as a hostage?
I was just a quiet citizen of Harper's Ferry.
How was your time while being Brown's hostage?
Calm, he did not harm any of us.
Did you see anyone killed or wounded during your time as a hostage?
No, I did not.
Do you know? Did you leave the engine house at any time?
Only to get Stephen's body.
What did you find when you got to his body?
Him dead.
Okay. Once you got to Stephen's body, what happened next?
I returned to the engine house.
Did you get hurt during this excursion?
I did not.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Will the defense please call its next witness?
The defense calls its second witness, Archibald Fitzgerald, to the stand.
swear to tell the truth, do solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do, so help me. What is your name and occupation? My name is Archibald Fitzgerald, and I work as a watchman at Huddersfield. Where were you October 19th? I was a hostage of John Brown's and lived out under 5 years of suspicions. Where were you and when were you captured? I was. How did Brown treat the hostages? With dignity and respect. What happened after you went to talk to the citizens? Stewards was shot. Stevens was shot. Did Brown say anything important about his revolt? He encouraged us to try. He encouraged us to try to avoid any unnecessary bloodshed. And did he say anything to the other hostages? No further questions, Your Honor. Prosecution may now cross-examine until the witness is clear.
Mr. Kitzmiller, did you hear Mr. Brown say anything regarding his view on slavery? If so, what?
He said he would fight if necessary to do so.
How did you feel when you were first captured?
I was afraid at first, but then realized that would happen soon.
Why did you feel that way?
Because the truth about it.
What did you do when Stevens was shot?
I know.
Did you help Mr. Brewer with Stevens' body? Why?
I don't.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
I will never cease trying to abolish slavery. A free and equal world is what God intended. Please see that John Brown is all right.
The defense calls next witness.
The defense calls its third witness, Ray Winters.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, so help me God.
Do you know why you're a defense witness?
I do, but that for no reason means I want to be here. My great uncle and the loved mayor of Harper's Ferry, Fontaine Beckham, was brutally shot and killed by one of Mr. Brown's men. In any sane man's perspective, it was only just that same happened to one of them.
What is your relationship to the late mayor of Harper's Ferry, Fontaine Beckham, who was killed in this unfortunate incident?
I already answered that, but I will explain it again. He was my great uncle and a better man than any of us sitting here today.
Narrative.
Sustained.
Who fired the shots that killed Thompson?
Me and another resident of Harper's Ferry, which was being attacked by a group of abolitionist terrorists, he being one of them.
Are you aware? Did you have any proof that Delphine Thompson killed your great uncle?
No, but he was part of the terrorist group that did.
Are you aware, Mr. Hunter, that the acts you perpetrated against Mr. Thompson are no better than the acts your people blame John Brown for committing?
I am aware, but think about this. How many people has he killed versus my one, which was to defend my city and the honor of my great uncle?
Do you feel any regrets for your part in murdering a man not yet found guilty?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
I killed that man because he was guilty, and I have no regrets.
At any time during the raid, did one of John Brown's men attempt to harm you?
They killed my uncle and harmed the nation by attempting to run off with their defenses, so yes, they harmed me.
Thank you. No further questions at this time. Would the prosecution like to cross-examine her?
The prosecution chooses not to cross-examine Mr. Hunter at this time because he is the son of a prosecuting attorney. Thank you.
If the court permits, I have a few words to say. I was not and never will be a reasonable government, but I will forever fight the war against slavery. This nation is going down a dangerous road and threatens to be torn apart from slavery. But yet nobody will do anything productive about it. The institution of slavery will split this country apart unless we abolish slavery altogether. I've never induced anyone to join me, no matter what they say. I ask them to join me in making a willingly to help with these things peacefully. I had no intention of harming the hostages that I took. I only took them to ensure the safety of the people that were looking at the time. My only intention with the raid was to safely and peacefully transport slaves to freedom. I feel entirely satisfied with the treatment I have received on my trial. Considering the circumstances, it has been better than I expected. I never conspired to take lives, commit treason, or make slaves of war. In fact, I never conspired at all. I never encouraged or will encourage any idea of that kind. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, thank you for your time. Thank you for those words. Bailiff, open on the top, please. Does the defense have anything else to say? No, Your Honor.
Closing arguments for the prosecution.
There's something else I can do. The prosecution make the summation?
It's a fancy word for closing remarks.
Okay, yes. Your Honor, members of the jury, through the case I've been representing the plaintiff and have intended to prove John Brown guilty. Let me remind you of some of the key facts in this case presented today. One important thing to think about is the man that Mr. Brown's men killed on the train. Also, you may want to think about the facts my witnesses said. We have seen today from Mr. Phelps, who was held at gunpoint and threatened into induced slavery by being held hostage, what it feels like to be scared and fearing for their life. Which brings me to Joseph Brewer, who was on the defendant's side and said that who was held hostage, also said that the 2 days he spent there were gruesome in his account. But before I am done, let me remind you of the 4 charges Mr. Brown is accused with. One is treason against the common welfare of Virginia. Another is conspiracy to induce slavery, insurrection, and finally, murder. With all those accusations, you have to wonder what his credibility would look like. With 4 accused illegal things on your back, how does that make you look as a person in general? Anyway, I would like to pause and say thank you to our judges, bailiff, jury, for their help in this case. Finally, I'm here to say for the last time, I think John Brown is guilty and would like to ask jury for a verdict of guilty on all charges.
The defense may now make its closing arguments.
The defense has shown that Mr. Brown is a passionate man who had great intentions to influence a group of people. The unfortunate outcome cannot be pinned on him. However, the burden of proof on the prosecution is to prove without a reasonable doubt that he is guilty. The prosecution was not successful because it was simply not possible. The unfortunate outcomes the prosecution states are simply not Brown's fault. Mr. Brown cannot be blamed for the violence that has occurred because it was not his intent. The actions were done to defend himself and his men they were not meant to cause harm. It was stated that Mr. Brown is a thoughtful and sympathetic man who treats all his men with respect. Mr. Brown doesn't prefer violence, however, if it's needed, he will defend himself and his beliefs. I would like to thank the honorable judge and jury for their time and dedication to this trial. In summary, the prosecution has been unable to prove any of the 3 charges. A man cannot be convicted of treason against a state he does not reside in. As far as the murder charge, there is a reasonable evidence that it could be self-defense. According to George Phelps' testimony, we know that Brown did not have any intention to harm anyone or anything. Phelps also stated that Brown said he was sorry that men had been killed and it was not by my orders. Therefore, the bad outcomes cannot and should not be blamed on Mr. Brown. Imagine yourself in Mr. Brown's shoes. He is a man who has lost everything. He lost his wife and his 2 sons in recent events and is desperately passionate about slavery. His actions were intended to deliver a positive result, however they came across as negative. Please consider Mr. Brown as a man who is willing to dedicate his life to his cause. Based on the testimonies given, we ask you to find Mr. John Brown, not guilty of all charges. Thank you.
Jurors, you have now heard the evidence from the mouths of the witnesses presented here and the summary arguments of the attorneys. It is now time for you to make a judgment. Please be aware that you are to make a decision based only on the testimony and evidence in connection with these alleged charges that you have heard in this court. The defendant should not be judged for past or possible future behavior only on these charges. Bailiff, take the jury to a place where they may be sequestered so that they may deliberate and render a verdict.
He's faking injuries.
For the jury, now enter and carry this case forward with their verdict. Have you reached a verdict? What is your verdict?
We find John Brown innocent of treason against the Commonwealth of Virginia, guilty of conspiracy to induce a slave insurrection, and guilty of murder.
John Brown, you are guilty of insurrection and murder. You are hereby sentenced to death by hanging 1 month from today. Court is adjourned.
Hey, 7th graders. Excellent job. You want to back up to excellent job. You know, a lot of you did this in 6th grade, so then you'd have to do this in 7th grade, and you can kind of see the progression. You went from a case that was something that actually happened, but the characters in it were not real, to something that happened, and then everybody, actually, these characters are real. I'm talking all day today, and you had to actually portray them in the historical manner. So that's really neat, and I'm impressed with just from last year to this year and how you were able to take those over. So I remember when you guys did this last year for those who participated. So nice work with that. And hats off to playing that part. You know, you got dressed up and you kind of figured out what that is. And a lot of you, I think at the beginning, were confused on what it was you needed to do, but you pulled it together and you figured it out, and that's impressive. And beyond just the mock trial experience, the experience of standing up in front of your peers and speaking is huge, because at some point you're going to have to do that where you have to speak in front of people. You're not going to be maybe a public speaker in front of hundreds and hundreds of people, but you will speak in front of people someday. So this is a skill, a life skill that's good for you to be able to do and just feel a little bit more comfortable. You're maybe not always going to love it, but at least you feel comfortable if you need to stand up. and how that looks. So like not having your back to the people, you know, talking to people and projecting your voice type of a thing, okay? So there's some other skills involved with this just besides being prepared, being responsible, and knowing a little bit about the court system. So, Mr. Dapper.
I let her go first because ladies always go first, right? But first off, I am super, super impressed. You guys did a really good job. You guys researched the last 2 days. You guys really dove in, and you guys really knew your parts. The witnesses did a great job on those cross-examinations. That's tough because you don't know what they're going to ask. So you guys did that very well. All the lawyers, you guys were very well prepared. So excellent job. The judges and the bailiffs, you guys did a great job kind of knowing. You're not really sure. You're working with all the other people, so you guys did a great job.
Opening and closing statement people always impress me. So opening and closing statements, just the way you word things, and you have to sum up this huge trial into like a couple paragraphs. And so that's very well done.
So super proud of you guys. No one let us down. You guys did an awesome job. And I asked Mr. I said, was this better than Hidden Oaks? And she said, without a doubt. So there you go. We beat Mr. Mertens. It's always our goal. Yeah, so you guys did a fantastic job. And John Brown did a great job. So thank you for that. Real quick.